Welcome everybody to the second of the Apex GBS webcasts, where we're talking about the standards that we've developed in the Apex committee for GBS organizations, and also some of the experiences of the people that put those standards together, all of whom are well-noted figures in the GBS industry. And we're very lucky to have today two fantastic people to talk to us. Now, just in terms of the way this thing is working, we're using LinkedIn Live to drive this discussion. You are anyone that's online, you're very welcome to ask questions at any time using the chat. I think we're about 20 seconds before you. So it's not possible to join in the conversation, but if you use the chat, we will come to the questions either in real time or at the end. And we're really looking forward to a dialogue with you. So this session is going to focus on the service operations chapter 2 of the book. And I've got two fantastic colleagues with me to talk about that. And I'm going to just start by asking them to introduce themselves and, what are your origin stories in GBS? What brought you to where you are today? And how did you come to be involved in Apex? And I'll start with you, Ajay. If you could introduce yourself and let us know how you got here.
Hey, Tim, thank you. And great to be here with you and Tony and all of our participants. Ajay Anand. I am a Senior Vice President of Global Business Services in Johnson& and Johnson. And I have been a part of our GBS journey within J&J for the past several years. The GBS model emerged as a key enabler of value creation and operational agility in what I call as a highly dynamic environment. And this success required strong executive sponsorship, extensive planning, disciplined execution, change management, and value measurement. And we have successfully navigated these complexities and built strong cross-functional collaboration and delivered our outcomes to improve all the end-to-end experiences while also accelerating our capability build like AI, automation, data, CI, to name a few. And one of the key contributors to our success was learning and sharing insights with our peers. So when I learned about
Mm,
Apex, it was a great opportunity to turn our experience and learnings into accessible guidance to help our peers with a strong end-to-end practitioner's perspective, to help them leapfrog some of the common challenges or headwinds
mm.
we faced when we went through the GBS journey. So when I look at Apex, it represents a strong and structured forum for peer learning and collaboration amongst practitioners. And our goal is to help capture our experiences in a way that is actionable while continuously validating them with the broader community, including the discussion that we are having today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ajay. And I'll turn to you, Tony. And I just have to say, embarrassingly, that you are known in my organization as the OG for GBS. So don't want to embarrass you too much, but maybe introduce yourself, and also your role, which is a pivotal one in Apex.
Hey, firstly, Tim, I want to say that I've heard from informal sources that broadcasters and radio hosts are starting to get really nervous. I heard from Anderson Cooper that he has real competition in this guy named Tim Palmer. So I, uh, this is a privilege for me, to be
Yeah.
with the famous Tim Palmer. No, seriously. Origin story. I'm not going to try the trick of the Big Bang and then the dinosaurs, but the fact of the matter is that it does feel like I've been around in the GBS industry, since the dinosaurs roamed the earth. I've been in this industry for more than 3 decades, and that includes being responsible for the global IT and global business services at Procter& and Gamble in all regions. That was a relatively big organization, $2.5 billion. But more importantly, I think it was the organization that really helped, create
Mm.
some of the models and the processes that eventually have gotten proven over time. Um, My role in this little August committee has been, a little bit of the person that tries to keep all of the cats herded, so to speak. We've got we've got an incredible talent of leaders that have been around to actually shape the industry, and I consider it my privilege to essentially run a lot of the processes
Yeah.
to bring these people together. Um, I actually think that the evolution of GBS is at the right time for people like us with scars on our back to try and structure
Mm.
our experiences into models. And that's really what we're hoping we are doing at this point in time.
Hey, thank you so much. That's really good. And let me turn to you again, Tony, and just ask you. Let's start to talk about the contents of chapter 2. So it's it's quite a big chapter with a lot of ground covered in it. And first of all, let's talk about value, which we covered in the first webcast with Matthias and Robert. And you talk about value in the chapter in terms of efficiency, effectiveness, and experience. Where have you seen the biggest value coming from adopting what we called the GBS construct in that first chapter? Start with you, Tony.
That's a fascinating question, and one that Tim and Ajay, as you know, we put in a lot of thought as part of chapter 2. So just to back up a little bit, chapter 2 is all about operations. It's about delivering operations. And in most GBS organizations that are still kind of focused on delivering cost reductions rather than higher levels of value, which is innovation and transformation of the company itself. This is essentially the factory, if you will, right? This is the offshore center or the BPO vendor that is actually doing transactions day in, day out. And at great efficiency, at reduced cost, and so on and so forth. So this is a really important chapter because this is the origin of most GBS organizations. This is where GBS starts. Now, the three metrics of value, they're really important because I think most people tend to think of GBS really either in terms of cost reduction, which is efficiency, or then delivering SLAs, which is the ability to translate into business outcomes.
Mm.
But as you kind of go up the value chain in GBS, as you then become the transformation engine of the entire enterprise, what you start to see is that we have to think of these metrics holistically, even in operations. So operations cannot just be, I'm going to mandate these ways of working at any cost. You have got to balance that with experience. Are
Mm.
you creating something that is pulling people towards you rather than shoving
Mm.
things down your throat? And so this was the insight that we've tried to capture in the chapter, which is to say, if you run GBS as if it was an open market business where you actually had to compete with other competitors for the business inside the company, how would you think
Mm.
in terms of
Mm.
your delivery, right? Is it just, lower cost? Is it just cheap labor? Is it just efficiency? Or also attracting people towards your product? And that's really the key there.
Oh, that's a great concept. And I should actually say that my current job title is head of business transformation and customer experience.
There you
And
go.
the CX is for internal customers. And
Yes.
so it's something we're putting that thing right at the top of our ambition, because it is very much coming from that mindset of attracting and pulling in, behaving as if there were a choice. And in fact, in many cases, there is a choice. And so you're trying to bring people to the best thing you can possibly be. Ajay, do you have any thoughts on this
Yeah, I'll add a couple of
subject?
thoughts, Tim, to what Tony has already shared. So completely agree with him. What we are finding is when we are describing value, it's across all three of those dimensions of efficiency, effectiveness, and experience. The two thoughts that I'll add is one, at least we have found there to be layers, right? So you need to kind of start with what is foundational and then go from there. And there's a life cycle aspect of it also. So what we have found is the biggest and fastest value from adopting GBS construct typically initially comes from process streamlining that you're able to do through standardization, harmonization, process reengineering, where you're removing the variability and the inefficiencies. You're then using that as a way to enable scale. And that's where you drive immediate value and create cycle time improvements by using that as the foundational layer. Once you have that in place, that then allows you to look at what might be the end-to-end process opportunities. Can you apply capabilities like automation, AI, data, and analytics to deliver the next big wave of value creation, which is where you start getting into effectiveness? Are you helping faster and better decisions? Are you creating actionable insights? Are you improving the accuracy of forecasting? And I look at it as you become using this as a multiplier on the value that you've created. And then finally, that then allows you, to Tony's point, to kind of get into a bit of a pull model, be more experience led, where you're thinking about things like UX and CX and how can you increase adoption and sustain the value creation and try to drive more stakeholder stickiness and alignment and use that also as a way to create value. So at least I've seen a bit of a life cycle and also a layering, if you will, in how you go through that maturity process.
Yeah. Thank you. And let's just talk about also the operations management framework. We're not going to go through all the details. Read the book or read the chapter. It's available on Amazon. You can also look on the Apex GBS website and download PDFs of the chapters if you prefer to do it that way. But let's talk about the operations management framework and just hear your experience and advice for the people listening on what the most impactful opportunities are for maturing and strengthening operations. Ajay, building off what you were just talking about.
Yeah, sure, Tim. So when you look at mature and effective GBS organizations that are able to deliver predictable cost to serve, great value, good levels of quality and experience, as we've talked, and you're able to enable scale and capability build, that can be achieved with a few key levers that we talk about in the book. So one is, as I said, the foundational element, which is around process streamlining through standardization, harmonization, and process reengineering. Thinking about strong experience and service management is another layer. And then looking at automation and AI and your ability to enable citizen development in those areas is another lever. And then finally, looking at effective talent and sourcing model. Once you've worked on these levers, they can then be translated into what we are calling an operations drumbeat on a day-to-day basis, where you're then bringing in core processes like your operations strategy, your operations control, and continuous improvement as a way to drive these benefits on a continuous basis and to make it your competitive advantage. What I will call out is two or three pitfalls that we have
Yeah.
seen, and it's good to just talk through them as a way of sharing them. If you do standardization without adoption, right, where you've not worked with your SMEs, your business partners, although I called it the foundational layer that can create a lot of value, it is not going to create all the benefit that you were thinking about. The second one is doing technology for technology's sake, right? So GBS is one of the places where you have to ensure that you have to do it everywhere, but certainly in GBS, people, process, technology, you're thinking about how are you reimagining the process, what are you trying to achieve with the process, and then thinking about introducing technology. And then the third pitfall that I'll call out is measuring the wrong things, right? So as Tony said, it's not just about cost, it's about the three E's that we've talked about. And how do you think about what we call 360-degree KPIs that allow you to look at all dimensions of what you're trying to achieve with your operations?
Those three things really do resonate with me. And we were talking yesterday about the problem. It's been in the industry for years of the watermelon KPIs that look green, but actually the service is not. And we again, with experience, we're also in what I'm doing, leading with KPIs. In fact, it's when we start a project, it's kind of deliverable number one is where are we going and what are the KPIs we're going to use to measure that journey. And but getting that thing right is not easy, as I think is what's behind what you're saying. Tony, you want to add anything on the operations framework and pitfalls and
Yeah.
maturing ideas?
Oh, absolutely. Would love to. One piece of context, the operations chapter and the work that we do here is incredibly important because keep in mind that, 80, 90% of the staff in the GBS industry is operations. These are the people in the, shared service centers and the BPOs that are actually doing the transaction. And so this is really where our army, if you will, is mostly situated. The second point I want to make is that, there is a best-in-class model to run these operations. And this is the insight that gray-haired people like me over a period of, 3 decades have figured out that we don't all have to reinvent the wheel. We can take some of these models and bring it to life. And that's really what that chapter and the model tries to do. Back to your point about, best-in-class stories. There are several, and in the process of the work that I do these days at Initia, we've had the opportunity to work with maybe about a dozen or so companies where we've actually gone into their operations. So this is a focus on operations, and we've helped them figure out how to take really good operations into absolutely incredible operations. And I want to share a couple of insights without getting into specifics of names. So in a couple of cases, the first and most important thing was, are you measuring the right things? Because it's very easy for us in the GBS industry to take all of the work that we do that comes out of the transaction factory, if you will, and to communicate that saying, hey, look, here's all the stuff that we're doing that's green. And then back to Ajay's point, this is where you're likely to see the watermelon effect, which is stakeholders who look at this and say, oh, I see a lot of green stuff coming from you, but hey, why is it that, the books are taking like a week to close, right? Or why is it that our suppliers are saying they don't get paid on time if all of these metrics are green? And so what tends to happen then is people will go in and then start to give, a lot of defensive arguments like, no, you're holding us accountable for end to end. We only control so much, and we only report against so much. That is what we've seen in a lot of cases. So we have to essentially take ourselves out of the factory and think as business transformation leaders. We have to say, let me take the payment on time example. The payment on time in this company, I'm sorry, it sucks. It is, usually 60 days delayed. That is deep red. The GBS portion of transaction management is green. And here are all of those things that need to be fixed in order for the company to benefit. You start to see how operations and the selection of metrics can play such a key role. So these are the kind of things, what metrics do you select? Are you essentially just simply automating or transforming at the same time? And how do you balance between running, continuous improvement, and disruptive innovation? These are the kind of things that we've seen great results on in some of my experience in this last decade or so.
I was on a meeting just like that this morning, Tony, and one of the things that we observed is that you can't do that stuff until you've got a foundation, a foundational understanding, foundation of process. But then when you've got it and you've got the confidence, you can start going after it, maybe piece at a time, to over the whole journey, improve the end-to-end process. And really strong stuff there about end-to-end process thinking and end-to-end KPIs as well. Let's move on to another question. And I'll just say, no one's put a question in the chat. Please do. We will have a few moments at the end and think about what you want to ask Tony and Ajay, and if there's anything that we can cover when we get probably about the half hour, we'll talk to that. One of the things that's also covered in the chapter is talking about GCCs, where there's so much written about this. There's so much discussed about this in industry forums. how have you experienced the value of that concept, the concept of a GCC, in your work, Tony?
Absolutely. I have to say that the concept of the GCC, for those of us that are located in and working in shared service centers, offshore centers, BPOs, I think this is, the most important construct that has come along in a long time within the GBS space. So the GCC is just to kind of level set ourselves, are an evolution of, what used to be transactional or business process factories, where they're now holding themselves accountable to do higher value added work, whether it is different type of work than just transaction processes, like for example, maybe even doing higher level design or research or development, or even in product innovation. That's one. But then even within the transactional organizations, not just doing operations, but innovation inside our typical processes of accounting and finance and HR and things like that. So that's really what's happening on GCC. Now, in my experience, there are a couple of things I want to say. Firstly, if you are coming at this, having been a shared service center and now trying to kind of move up the chain to a GCC, you really have to make sure that you got the foundations correct, that you have the credibility before you go in and pitch the idea that, hey, we're going to be doing all of this great stuff for you, right? So again, make sure you got the foundations right before you pitch. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't aspire to it, but there is a sequence to it. The second point I want to make is that, in my experience, and actually even recently, just over the past couple of weeks, having had a conversation with two GCCs in India, there is real power to managing by proposing to the headquarters. More often than not, the headquarters of these companies don't really completely even understand what is possible. And so, in a headquarter-centric world, to actually have somebody that understands the business and the value that an offshore outpost can generate is really important. And so don't shy away from making proposals. The worst thing that can happen is that people will say no the first 3 times, and then they will say, well, it may be worth trying something out. And so those are a couple of thoughts from my side.
Yeah, very good. And Ajay, you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, sure, Tim. Let me add a couple of thoughts. So agree with everything Tony said. The way I define it, GCCs is beyond what Tony has already said. These are strategic hubs that are created to build specialized, knowledge-intensive, innovative capabilities. I've seen examples of this being done in areas like R&D for digital transformation, for analytics, as an example. And based on my own experience and having spoken to many of the peers, what we have seen is that GCCs have been very effective in driving measurable gains in a few areas. One is faster cycle times with innovation or time to insight, as an example. Two, driving digital transformations more effectively, where you see higher degree of AI and automation adoption within a corporation as a result of the GCC being focused on it. We've seen folks look at new sources of value where you're either using new decision support systems or new platform services that you're able to offer. Certainly a great way to think about building what I call future ready capabilities. And finally, I've also seen it playing a very promising role in building what I call a strategic talent pipeline. When you
Ah,
think about some of these areas where this is where you could have that incubation happening of some amazing leaders who can, be a part of what your strategic talent strategy is in the future.
yeah. That talent one is really good. And I would add one thing, which is um, setting. You can also set when your GCC has got the trust of the HQ, you can set it challenges and say, hey, you've got cross-functional teams here. What would you do with this problem? And you would be amazed, the HQ will be amazed with the quality of the thinking and execution that comes out of it. We've got a couple of questions coming in. So I think I've got one more question for you to close out the workshop, which I'll ask, and then we'll go to the questions that have come in. And the final question, which I'm asking everybody that we talk to on these podcasts, is what have you learned personally from your work in Apex? Which is, it's an amazing question to ask, because here we are putting these standards together, but I'm learning every day through my involvement in Apex. I'll start with you, Tony. What have you learned?
Um, the first thing I should say is I have been amazed by the generosity and the incredible capability in this industry, and specifically in the committee. So just as context, I mean, we're a nonprofit. We're in this, Ajay and Tim and everybody is donating their time and their capability because they think this is our way to kind of give forward, pay it forward, and develop the next talent. But I have been amazed at the generosity of my colleagues in here. But the second thing, and perhaps the more relevant thing from a professional standpoint, is I have learned how much richness there is in structured standard models in the way we operate GBS, right? Um, you know, I think most companies kind of have homegrown experiences on how to create a service or how to improve a service or how to automate it and things like that. But my biggest learning has been that when you step back out of this and you start to look at the data, there are proven models that exist that, we need to now go from handmade tailoring of all of these processes to picking off the rack standard, ready-made kind of approaches. And it's incredible. My amazement has been that, just so much exists, and that, there is an opportunity to leapfrog as a result of using some of this.
Ajay, you want to add anything?
Hey, Tim, when you asked me the first question around why Apex, I said one thing about just the value in learning from your peers and sharing what you've learned. So in addition to what Tony said around structure and playbook and methodology, what I'll say, it's a very dynamic space, right? When you're in the GBS space, there are so many different factors that impact you. You have to be a very strong, what I call a bimodal leader, where you have to run operations really well, but you also have to be on the cutting edge of innovation with the questions that you're asking about AI, and everyone wants us to get involved in agentic AI. Communicating value is very challenging. You have to become a very good value narrator and translator. You have to be a strong
Mm,
champion of talent. You have to always work with the C-suite, and how are you going to influence them on what makes sense versus not, what should be in GBS versus not. And there's just so much to learn when you're talking to practitioners who are dealing with all of those dimensions on a daily basis. And so I love the learnings around all of those dimensions and how we are all, as Tony said, very committed to taking that, codifying it, and making it available to our peers who are interested in traversing through the same journey.
thank you, thank you. Well, look, that's my question. So let's do the questions that people have asked. So John was first up, John Spellman, who I used to work with years ago, and he's asking for comments on the changes that you see with the evolution of AI and agentic AI into the GBS industry. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say what I'm noticing, at least within the work that we are doing, is we are still in very early stages to clearly understand where we might go about applying agentic AI. We do believe that it will add significant value in how we go about serving the sectors and functions. So what we are doing at this point is building a very good portfolio by looking at what might be the places where we can reimagine our processes and services that are in our scope, with the intent of finding the most high impact opportunities. And we are also doing some small pilots to prove it. I do believe that it is one of those capability areas that will have a profound impact on GBS in the future. But that's my hypothesis, and more work to be done to prove that through some of the work that we are going to be doing in the experimentation phase before we go through adoption. And we're working very closely with our technology partners on what this means, what technologies to use, and all that as well.
If I may, just very quickly, and by the way, Ajay is absolutely right. He's one of my go-to persons because the
Ah,
combination of the vision and execution and technology. But I want to make one other point, which is there is a big difference between automation and AI. So the use of AI agents and agentic AI. AI agents are automation. They essentially take a given work process and they, truly help you automate it even more by decision making happening through agents. And this is obviously a current and available, big, rich source of competitive advantage. Um, and then I want to separate that from agentic AI, which is, I think, 100 times more powerful. And to the point that Ajay was making, everybody is dabbling. Nobody's really gotten there. But make no mistake, it is going to be 100% more powerful because agentic AI essentially takes any given outcome and it allows you to completely reimagine it using humans and robots and completely different work
mm,
processes.
mm.
And that's a lot harder, but it is a lot bigger in terms of price. So this is one of those reasons why we love this space. This is an incredible opportunity.
It's something that we've talked about a lot about how to deal with it as well in the standards because it's an evolving capability and something that's moving very fast. And just had a couple of Risha and Shane also um, chipped in with sort of sub questions on AI. So Risha saying, how can companies use AI? What are some of the learnings when implementing AI in the organization? And Shane, where's the biggest opportunities for automation or AI in service operations? Do you want to just address either of those questions quickly?
Yeah, I can start with the one from Richa around what some of our key learnings are. First and foremost, I would say it's developing a strategic mindset where you're not thinking about AI, Gen AI, Agentic AI as a tool, but rather a capability shift with very clear goals that is improving your outcomes. And we talked about the value of effectiveness, experience, efficiency. So how are you anchoring AI adoption and AI into your strategic business priorities?
Mm,
Getting strong leadership support is extremely critical. How do you go about prioritizing change management and communications? Because that's how you're going to help ensure that the employees are able to adopt this effectively. Creating a culture of learning. And then what we did, which worked really well for us, is establish a champions group of early adopters and community of practice that would help drive traction and becoming masterful storytellers. How do you take those success stories and say them in a way that employees and other stakeholders and senior leaders understand
mm,
what you did and how did that go about helping you? And highlighting those use cases. And then it's very important to use AI very responsibly. So we've got a very strong governance process in place. We ensure everything goes through that governance process, and we are training all of our employees on responsible use. So those are some thoughts that come to my mind. I'm sure, Tony, you've got a few thoughts that you would like to add as well.
No, perhaps I can take the other question from Shane, which is, what are the biggest opportunities? And here's what I would say. The acceleration of opportunities that you see is primarily in, the finance, the supply chain, and interestingly enough, I think in the human resources areas, through continued operations, automation of the operations. What's different is that, if you take a process like, order to cash or even procure to pay, there is a framework that has said that even with the best platforms and best of operations, the best in class company was only able to automate only about 70% of those work processes. And that's basically because there was decision making that really you could not get past a certain point. I think what has happened is, you know, that 70% is now become 80% through AI. So anything that essentially was about human touches, and there's still a lot of human touches. You look at where are most of the shared services people and BPO partners being used. Look at the FTEs there, and those are the biggest opportunities for AI in particular to touch because previously we needed those people because we needed humans to make some decisions. that's where I'm seeing a lot of the newer wave of automation start to help. So, for example, approval processes, reconciliations in finance, vendor setup and payment processes, or even, hiring and performance management processes. All of those really needed an army of people, and all of those are the place to start.
Very good. Thank you. Great thoughts there on AI adoption. It's something I'm sure we'll talk about on future webcasts further. So let me just go to a last couple that we have online. So Steve Dunkerley has asked this question, which is interesting to see how GBS organizations evolve over time. Some become broad operations, like the evolution of NBS. Is that maybe Novartis? I think.
Novartis, yeah, Novartis.
Yeah, yeah. And which I was very much part of building, and some are becoming more commercial, like Vodafone's VOIS. What do you see as the future for GBS? That's a great question, and impossible to answer. But any futurist ideas from both of you?
I'll take a crack at that, and of course, Ajay, please chime in. I'm a big student of history because I think, if we look at historic patterns, they have some clues on where things are likely to go. So here's what I would say. Steve, you're absolutely correct. Individual GBS organizations could actually evolve in probably three different forms, right? So more scope, more control, more transformational work. And as Novartis did, taking on not just procurement, but then also other innovation functions inside the company. So truly become, even higher value add inside the company. So that's one way. Another way is when company leaders start to recognize that, hey, we've got an incredible capability. Why not spin off some products and maybe even, take this capability and commercialize it? And that's another place that, we see a lot of value. But I'm going to take a somewhat third but contentious area, which has unfortunately been the fate of many organizations, GBS organizations, which is then they actually end up imploding after some time. And the reasons could be various. It could be that, they are unable to keep the partnership with the business. And so the antibodies eventually, this is like the Star Wars, the Empire Strikes Back kind of thing. You basically have the function in the business unit say, I'm not sure these guys are actually working for us anymore. It seems like we're working for them. And then things start to kind of fall apart. Now, the reason I mentioned that grim possibility is because I've unfortunately been, over the period of 3 decades, been associated with some really, really successful companies, including in some places General Electric, General Motors, Boeing, and so on and so forth, that ended up kind of either disbanding or remodeling their GBS. And I strongly believe that that can be avoided. And the way you want to avoid that is to never lose sight of the fact that you have to earn the business. You cannot essentially push anything down people's throats. So now, which individual shared service is going to go down which paths, I think your guess is as good as mine. But I think the number of paths, are fairly finite. I think we could see that.
I have watched this close up in a number of different organizations and studied it as well. And one of the things that I think there's a sort of half-life of a GBS of maybe 2-3 years. And really every 2 or 3 years, you kind of need to reset and reassess what it is that you're going for, because essentially you kind of set a strategy, then you go for it. And then usually something changes. So it might be business strategy change or executive leadership change. In both of those two cases, when I've been in successful GBSs, we've shifted, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but we've adjusted our approach and then built a new wave of value to meet the new situation. But you've got to keep doing it. And so something like a P&G or a Novartis. I mean, I was in Novartis for 12 years. We went through, I think, at least 5, maybe 6 versions of GBS in that time.
That last point
Right.
is so true. Sorry, Ajay. That last point is so true. At Procter and Gamble, Philippa, who actually started this, uh, used to have a drumbeat of actually reorganizing GBS deliberately every 2 to 3
Yeah,
years.
yeah, there you go.
So you really have to
There you go.
force yourself to change. Ajay, you were saying
No,
something.
I was just agreeing with what both of you were saying. Being very adaptive, resilient, and flexible is the name
Mm,
of the game if you're in GBS, and your ability to continuously do the reinvention, as I
mm.
see in the chat, is going to be extremely critical. I love the idea of just looking to proactively redefine every 2 years, Tony.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Listen, I will take us to the last question that's been asked, and we'll just do this in a very short form because we're getting to the end of the time. But from Dhruv, and he's just said, "What's your one line? What's the most valuable thing that you've learned from your long experiences working in GBS?"
Yeah, I'll go first. I'll just connect it to the hot topic that everyone seems to be talking about with AI. I feel that we as in GBS are at the right place at the right time for the impact we can have with AI. I personally think AI requires 4 key ingredients to be successful: very deep domain expertise, the ability to understand all the data and content very effectively, strong talent and technology. Just with the role that GBS plays, you always come to the table with such a deep understanding of the domain, the process. You bring strong talent and you very deep understanding of content and data. I do believe that GBS can be a game changer for most corporations with the next wave of innovation that we are seeing with technologies. And that's a key learning and a key insight for me. And I'm hoping that together we can all action it and continue to drive positive impact.
Super.
In
Thank
my
you, Ajay.
case, um, uh, my number one learning is it's all about mindset. You got to ask yourself, what business are you in GBS? In GBS, not inside your company, in GBS. And I think there are a couple of mindset choices. One is you're the person in the back office that asks for orders and delivers them with excellence. Another option is you have to kind of see yourself as the internal McKinsey or Bain or Deloitte that's going to actually transform the company, but not just consult, actually deliver. And I think what makes it so exciting is that we're seeing more and more GBSs
Mm,
become part of the second model.
mm. Pushing the boundaries. I think that's a really great place to leave this webcast. I've relearned things. I've learned some new things and reminded myself of things. Definitely, we created some energy around the pull concept, and we came back to that a number of times through the discussion. We had a good conversation around AI, and I'm sure we'll develop that more on further webcasts. And the next webcast we've got scheduled is on service management, and should be in December. And so look out for that on LinkedIn, and please do come and join us again if you've enjoyed this session. And then I'm going to take away as forced to your elbow the proposing 2 HQs concept from Tony. I think that was a really good, thought-provoking idea that those of us working in GBS organizations can take on board. So I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for coming, and best of luck to all of you for the rest of the week.
Thanks for hosting us, Tim.
Yeah,
Oh
thank
no,
you.
I should have said thank you so much for joining,
Yeah.
Tony and Ajay.